If you're an audio fanatic like me, or just thinking about how to upgrade how you're listening to music or podcasts, you have to know about Victrola. They have been bringing innovation and style together since 1906. I'm going to tell you about one of their products that I got called the Journey Plus. It's a great sounding Bluetooth speaker and record player that's affordable and can link to my other Bluetooth speakers. It sounds so good and now it sits on top of my old record player. They have over 30 different color options, so it fits in any room of the house. And of course, I got mine wrapped in denim. If you've ever seen us perform live, you know about my obsession with wrapping guitars and other stuff in denim. But they already did it for me. Right now, to show off their online record store, they're having special savings like free shipping on orders over $35 or more, as well as a great deal of 15% off if you buy 3 records from their record store. I got the new Run the Jewels record. I got a Stone Temple Pilots Holland import. They have tons of stuff on there, so make sure to check it out. So go to makingnoisepod.com/Victrola for your savings. That is makingnoisepod.com/VICTROLA for your special offers today. 3, 5. Make some noise! What's up, everybody? Welcome to Making Noise with Todd Johnson. My name is Todd Johnson. We're happy that you're here. I'm here with Mr. Jay Connor. What are you doing? We're not doing a show or anything. You can.
Sorry,
no,
I get distracted sometimes.
No, you can keep playing with your phone.
I can keep playing with my phone.
Yeah,
good.
sure. No,
yeah,
we're not doing anything.
I'm playing Words with Friends with my girlfriend.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can't. No matter what I do, she beats my ass every single time. Like I won one the other day, and I felt like I climbed Mount Everest. Like I can't seem to string it together. True story. After that one, we played another because she rematched me, right? Because she hates losing.
Okay.
So then we play another one. And I think that I've won it on the last word, and I'm like sending her messages, yeah, because you can send messages and words with friends too. And then I realized that she actually has another turn left because she has letters, but I don't.
Oh, so you just okay?
Yeah, and then she won on the last word.
So you're taking like your one victory and just bringing that up.
I was trying, man.
Well, you remember I kicked your ass that one time by 4 points.
Try to build some confidence in what's going on.
Yeah, I think that we need to come up with some like sustaining music, some music of some sort, just to add drama to Words with Friends. Because I gotta say that song was boring as hell.
It was, right?
If we could just add some like while you're telling it, like dun, 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 dun,
put some of those pads of that ominous sound. We'll get a little ominous sound under there.
Sound. Yeah. Where'd you get that hat? What is that?
It's a brewery.
Oh.
Up in, I guess it's Cornelius. It might be Huntersville. It's right there.
I can't see. What is it?
It says Ass Clown.
Oh, okay.
Drink one, don't be one.
Oh, that's great. Well, yeah, I couldn't tell what it was. I didn't see. I just kept seeing clown. I didn't see.
It has the ass part on the front of it. Okay. They actually have pretty good beer.
Mentioning of great places and great things around North Carolina, we have our next guest today is a photographer and writer who lives here in Charlotte but works all around the country. His credits include Johnny Cash, the Avett Brothers, the Monkees, the Beach Boys, many more. Tons of people. This guy's worked with a lot of people. He's also the author of 6 books. And he's got 2 more coming out in 2021.
Jeez, man, that's a busy guy.
Busy dude. Busy dude. Here is our interview with the one and only Mr. Daniel Coston.
Woo!
Insane.
Yeah. Do you want to use cans? You can't. You don't have to. If
Actually,
you don't
I'll
want to.
go without.
Okay. Yeah, that's totally fine.
I've always done the John Lennon thing where I always wear one on, one off, or I just don't wear it. So.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I've gotten so used to it now, and just especially for this monitoring.
Especially since you're manning the board and want to make sure everything.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Totally understandable.
I got to make sure I sound sexy as possible.
I just like the way I sound.
Oh yeah.
So.
Jay's gonna start a late night.
A late night
DJ,
smooth jazz, romantic
Jay
DJ
after
set.
dark.
Exactly. Jay after dark.
Yeah, that was cool. The Josh Daniels thing. I did see that.
That was amazing.
You said it was what, 8th?
Eighth that day.
Which show? He does so many.
Well, it was the annual band tribute.
Oh, so
and it was the one they've done a
tribute,
Visualite for years, and then they were going to do it at a drive-in really was a field.
Yeah.
In Concord, and Concord shut it down. They was like,
Oh,
we'll just
wow.
do it at our house.
Yeah, I didn't know Concord
And-
shut it down.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think, and I told Josh, I said, in the long run, I think you're better because ultimately, you want to control the sound. You want to, even with the crowd,
Right.
the important thing was still how it was going to go out over, online because he has so many followers online. It's like you got to control how you did it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'd love to have seen it in a drive-in setting. And I think that will come at some point. But I think he did okay in the long run.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah. Well, it's crazy. I remember seeing him at Smokey Joe's
Yeah.
in maybe mid 2019, earlier 2019,
Yeah.
something like that. And I was like, man, you just kind of starting to do this whole Facebook Live thing at your shows. That's really been picking up. He's like, yeah, I just kind of put it on at first. He's like, we'll see where it goes, whatever.
Yeah.
And it was just, I mean, talk about being completely prepared for pandemic life.
Yeah.
In a way, I mean, it's great. It's
In some way,
fantastic.
all this has sort of come to him as opposed to he moved. I mean, he was sort
Yeah.
of starting to get this ball rolling, and all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and
Right.
it's like the world moved to him.
Oh,
Kind
absolutely.
of crazy, but he's
Well, he was the only one in town who had the infrastructure
Yeah.
already done. It was just kind of like, and it's it's not like he was like excited about it. He was like, well, I guess I have my gigs canceled. I'll just stream today.
Yeah.
And then just from there, I mean, it's fantastic.
But he's also been willing to ride it. So many people get
Yes.
that burst of fame, or they say, "Oh, that's cool," and they overthink it, they underthink it, and they freak out, and you don't hear from him for 2 years. So I'm glad he said, "Okay, this is happening. I'm going to go with it."
Right.
So it's been very cool.
Yeah.
And as somebody who, especially watching this band tribute, I'm glad
Yeah.
they did it to continue it, because as somebody who actually was there when they opened for Levon Helm, I know how important it was to all of us that night, and I want to see that that feeling, that vibe continue.
Right. Yeah.
So-
I mean, that's definitely a Charlotte tradition. Is that
Yeah.
going and seeing that show.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember seeing it last year or whatever, and just lost count of the amount of people who were on stage. I mean, it was just so
it's
cool.
insane. It was it was so cool to see Pat Mulholland last year come back and play with
Yeah.
them, and that meant a lot to a lot of us.
It had to be. I mean, that show. All I could think of was like, this is great, but this has to be a logistical nightmare.
Oh, it's a free for all. I mean, the Visualite and Josh and those guys, they've done this so many times. They just write it. They just figure it out and go. But yeah, if you walked into that cold, oh my God, yeah.
Oh yeah, I would have no idea what's. Yeah, it was so good to watch. It was so fun to watch.
Well, I'll tell you, as somebody who played it for the first time last year,
Yeah,
Well, that's right. That's right.
yeah.
I played Barry on that show last year with them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
and it was interesting, and the sound check was very involved. It took a long time, and we had to wait for each individual person, and we're just like, all right, is it our turn yet?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
But it was awesome. It was a lot of fun, and the preparation for it was great, and those charts were just so much fun to play. So
Yeah. Oh my God, they're reissuing Stage Fright. I think next month.
Oh,
wow. And I've always thought that record would benefit from a new mix, and so they're doing that. But they've also found a whole lot of recordings that Robbie, Richard, and Rick did in a hotel room jam of those songs, like around the time the record was being mixed. And I'm just like, okay,
That'd
hanging
be
out late
fun.
night with those guys, I can handle that. I want to hear that.
Yeah, me too. I'd love to
So
hear that.
it's got a bunch of things that I really want to check out, and I just the band is awesome.
Yeah,
I've
absolutely.
met 3 of the 5.
Oh
so,
yeah. Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
met Levon. Hung out with Garth Hudson one night, which was an amazing out of body experience, and I met Robbie Robertson at South by.
Wow.
Many
Oh,
years
cool.
ago.
Very cool.
Nicest things anybody's ever said to me was Garth looked at me just out of the blue and goes, "You and Rick would have gotten on great together. You both like to laugh." It's just like, if I die at this moment, that's a heck of a way to go.
Yeah, I saw you do the Mercury Carter show at
Photograph
Neighborhood.
that Thursday, yeah.
Yeah, I just figured out about him. He's fantastic.
Yeah. He is really something. He did a show last year at the Mint Museum where he's
Okay.
like a 5-piece band, had all kind of white backgrounds behind it, so it meant they could project things behind them, which I actually first saw Whiskey Town do at their New Year's Eve show in '99, the one where they did their first 2 records back to back. But that was a total accident where the Cat's Cradle just painted the walls, so they were painted white, so it meant that all the colors were reflected on the back walls. It looked amazing. This show, Mercury planned for that, and it looked fantastic. But
Wow.
I have to say, seeing him this time with 4 backup singers, just total bringing the gospel, was amazing.
I mean, he's just
Yeah.
just fantastic.
And those were real tears when he was singing at the end, dedicated the song to his father, and did the Donny Hathaway song. That was real.
Wow.
That was very real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it makes, I don't know. I was so blown away by him, and he seems like a genuinely beautiful person.
He is.
You know,
He is.
like just a very kind, soft soul person. Like
Yeah.
just a really good person in general. You know.
I really look forward to seeing what he does over the
Yes.
next few years. I think he has the room and space and the age to grow, where he mixes in his own material with other songs, interpretations, like he was doing last
Right.
week, and it could be something. It
Yeah.
could be really, really something. There's something I still really enjoy, and I say that as somebody who's worked with a lot of heritage bands, who's worked with a lot of bands, like the second, third eras of their careers. Working with someone on the way up, watching them and going, oh my God, there's so much potential in
Right.
that person. There's so much they can do. It's so thrilling to
Right.
to watch that arc.
Well, I mean, you've seen a lot of people do that. Well, you just said that about Whiskey Town in '99. I mean, that had to be a trip.
That was a total trip.
I mean,
Yeah.
where was that kind of? Were you kind of a part of that, like that scene at the moment, like the
I
Raleigh
was.
Chapel Hill kind of area
Yeah.
scene?
Well, come backtracking a bit.
Yeah.
I've lived in Charlotte like 37 years. I started taking photographs around 95. I started photographing bands around 1996. Literally, the first 5 bands I photographed in Charlotte all hired me, because back then there was really one other person who was taking pictures of bands.
Right.
And it was happening around the time I was going, I like writing. I like video work, which is what I've been doing. I thought I was going to be a filmmaker. Didn't happen, or it didn't happen the way I wanted. And I was looking for something else, and photography just said, you're doing this.
Right.
Hang on. And so I did that in Charlotte for about a year, but then 96, 97, as you remember, North Carolina was blowing up.
Yeah.
In Ben Folds 5, there was still the scene that had been in Chapel Hill with Superchunk, Archer's a Loaf. Raleigh suddenly had this new scene with Whiskey Town, the Backsliders, Six String Drag. There were bands like in Salisbury, like Mercury Dime, bands in Charlotte, like, there was even in Charlotte, like Lou Ford. There was just this wave that was happening throughout the state. And I figured out early on that in Charlotte, I was known as a local guy, but I didn't want to be a local guy. I wanted to be a photographer. So when I went to Chapel Hill, it was like an even playing field. Suddenly Ryan Adams and all these other bands, like, oh, well, we didn't go to high school with you. You don't know who you are. You came from Charlotte to photograph us? Well, can I see your pictures? Can I buy some?
Right,
So
okay.
pretty quickly, I started doing work with Backsliders. And
Oh, cool.
I shot the last Archer's a Loaf show in 98. And then I got to know Ryan and Whiskey Town. I shot several shows for them, 98, 99. And they invited me to the New Year's show in 99. Remember, this was... Y2K.
Right.
We all thought the world was going to blow up.
Power's
and I was
gonna
just
go
like,
out. Right.
The world's going to blow up. I might as well go to a Whiskey Town show.
Right.
It makes absolute sense.
How was it like? So, at like that era, I mean, they're catching on. But it's that same thing
Yeah.
we were just talking about with Mercury, like it's catching on. But I mean, obviously now with how massive Ryan Adams and just everything with that. Like, I mean, what was it like to be? Like, how were they like? Did they just kind of feel like high school kids figuring it out, or
No, they
were they like wise beyond it? Like, what were they like?
A mixture of both. Whiskey Town wanted to be the Stones and the Replacements all at the same time, and some nights they were.
Yeah.
I can honestly say I thankfully never saw a bad Whiskey Town show. Every show I saw, even the occasionally messy ones. I was at the one in Charlotte where Ryan smashed a vintage '65 Gibson on stage, and I actually had a duck behind one of the monitors so it wouldn't hit me in the head. But New Year's, I think they had something to prove because they had some issues. They were getting ready to release Pneumonia, which ended up not happening for another year or two. They definitely had something to prove at that show.
Right.
But really, that was one of those bands that the band you encounter depending on what night you saw them. Not just the personnel, but
Right.
where their heads were. But that night they really were on it. There are bootlegs out there, and you actually can hear Lynn Blakey say hi to me on mic in the bootleg, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that's rad.
Yeah, she's like, "Hi, Daniel." It's like it's so weird to hear. I'll hear it like years later. Go, "Oh yeah, there's my name. That's me. I was there. The shows like that was like, they really were going to do this, and if the world's going to hell, let's blow this out.
Blow it up. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a good night. It really was.
Do you get to? I feel like you probably get to be around for those moments so much more than like the bad moments or the, you know, I mean, there's still bad moments I'm sure that you see, but like the backroom moments of like was it more one of those things of, you know, when Ryan went solo, like you knew that was happening, or was it just one of those things you were like, oh, is he signed to that? You know what I mean?
It just sort of happened because around that time, 99 into 2000, I ended up doing some work with Bloodshot because they used some of my pictures to promote Heartbreaker. It was just sort of happening. It was like Whiskey Town had gotten dropped by their label. They were kind of figuring out what they want to do. Ryan was figuring out what he wanted to do.
Right.
He makes this record in Nashville with Gillian and David. And it was kind of like, I think at that point, Ryan had figured, well, I'm not going to be a rock star. I'll just do this and we'll figure it out as I go. And then when Heartbreaker hit, it was like this, it's like, oh, I'm a rock star again. Now I'm a real rock star. And it was like, put him at a different place, a different level.
Well, yeah,
So it just sort of, that felt more organic, or just as much as Ryan ever planned anything. It was just, it felt more, it was like, oh, he's doing this, well, he's doing this. And then all of a sudden, Heartbreaker blows up, he signs to a new major label, and he's off again.
Yeah. I mean, what a record. I mean, for me, that record is just, you know, you can't beat it, you know.
Much as I would love to see him work again with someone like Gillian and David, I mean, that was him at that moment. I'm not sure if he will allow himself to be as collaborative with those people as he was in that situation.
Right.
I mean, he works with great musicians now, but he's Ryan Adams, you know.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
It's sort of, we were discussing the band a little bit ago. There was a point in the band where it was all five of them on the same playing level, and then it was Robbie Robertson and the other guys interpreting Robbie's songs. And
that changes things.
It totally changes things. That changes the dynamics, changes how you view each other, and sometimes it changes the artist's willingness to say, I'm going to work with you and push myself a little more, a little harder to create something different.
Well, it's so much, I mean, it's so much harder to take a step back when you've had success.
Yeah.
And somebody that you don't know or is younger than you or has a different opinion or whatever says, we should do this. You're like, well, I've already done this before. Yeah. You know, and it's interesting. It's like the joke of like, I can't remember who it was who said it, but someone was like, Springsteen's never going to put out another great record again, is what they said. And like the idea was like, because who's going to be in the room with Bruce Springsteen and tell him, I think you could write this song a little bit better, you know, or something like that. And it's more of a joke. And I mean, you know, obviously me being the Springsteen head I am, I'm like, his last record was great. But it does kind of bring up that point of like, once you get to that area, like you said, you've got to really be able to come back to, and there's bands that have done that before though, that I think, and there's artists, you know, I mean, Chili Peppers have done it, you know, especially, you know, Green Day completely did it in mid 2000s.
Well, a great example is Mr. Cash and the work he did with Rick Rubin.
Oh my God. So working with him, like that's the obvious, working with Johnny Cash. How did you,
oh wow.
So you're starting out, I want to get there. So like the through line from like being in Charlotte and taking pictures and going around the state to take pictures. How does it go from, you know, regional photographer to working with Johnny Cash? Like, where did that jump happen?
I think the simplest answer is I just kept pushing myself. It was like, okay, now I'm working around the state. Now, okay, here's this band named Drive By Truckers. You know, photograph them in Raleigh, photograph their second album, start working with them. Okay, now I'm working in Georgia. And my whole thing was, at the time, was never, I just want to work out of Charlotte or North Carolina. I just wanted to go and do it. You know, some of my heroes, as I got in deeper into music photography, was folks like John Cohen, older 60s photographers like Jim Marshall, all the guys that work with the Beatles. A lot of them were, you know, or older blues photographers like Ernest Withers, who I got to spend a couple days with later on. And these were guys who just went out and did it. They was like, where's the gig? I mean, much like a working musician. Where's the gig? Let's go do it. And through working with different people, I kind of kept pushing myself, getting up to bigger levels. And I wanted to do that, and it was thrilling. It was a lot of fun. Didn't always pay the bills. The music business is tough at any field, and it's tough as a
Really?
photographer.
No,
it's stunning. I know. It is what it is, and it was shifting and changing and into the early 2000s. In 2002, I started working with the Down from the Mountain tour. I shot the second date of the winter tour in Spartanburg, which was an amazing experience, and then they bought some of those pictures for the summer tour. So I ended up shooting the summer tour here and there with the promise of getting paid more. But that was an interesting experience in that it was 6 major sponsors. You're playing hockey arenas and nobody wants to pay for anything because the label wants to keep this profit margin up month after month. It was like, oh my God, here's this pot of money we didn't plan on. Here it is. Well, how many more months can we get this pot of money again?
Right.
And suddenly you're working on this tour, and you're
Excuse me.
you're that's fine. The water pump on your car is dying as you're driving back from Louisville, and
Right.
you're going, how am I going to pay for all this? And throughout that tour, it was like, okay, do I want to keep chasing this major label carrot of trying to make a living on this level, or am I going to continue working with music that I care about? And the last night of that tour I shot was in Raleigh, and I always kind of wandered through the crowd to hear people sing Keep on the Sunny Side, Carter Family song.
Yeah.
And I got into the middle of the crowd that night, and some voice in my head started yelling at me, saying, you need to know more about this music. You need to... It was something in my head, something in the ether was telling me, you've got to take this to a different place. And if you're going to stay in, if you're going to continue in this, if it was just about the money, end it now. And I was like, okay, there's something else I need to figure out. So I started learning more about the Carter family. Well, you go to the Carter fold. The Carter family fold is in Hiltons, Virginia. It used to be known as Poor Valley. It's the home of the Carter family.
Right.
And Jeanette and Joe Carter, the children of Sarah and A.P. Carter, the original Carter family, built this in the 70s. And I went on my birthday in 2002 and felt like I'd been there 100 years. It's one of those places you walk in and you go, I've belonged here all along. I couldn't tell you why, but I do. And the family was great, and they were like, well, come back in the summer, we'll introduce you to Johnny and June. Because John and June would come and play this venue unannounced, particularly when John got off the road.
Okay.
And so I'm still working here and there. I'm working a little in Charlotte, but I'm trying to work on the road, working with different bands. I'm starting to do stuff with this band from Concord called the Avett Brothers. So, I'm still here and there.
Right.
And in May of 2003, June Carter suddenly passed away. That was a surprise to a lot of us. She'd had some health issues, but she'd not told anyone because she was taking care of John. Mm-hmm. And when June passed away, we really didn't think that I didn't feel like I'd have any chance to see Mr. Cash. And so that was in May, I think it was like May 15th. And a month later, June 14th, 2003, I had a free Saturday, and I felt like I should go to the Carter fold.
Right.
Don't tell me why. I couldn't tell you why. So I went. It was a 4-hour drive. And I'm wandering around, and they're talking about this show that's going to happen next week, but they're not talking about it. There's some unspoken thing.
Right.
I can't put my finger on. It's like, okay. So I start talking to some of the folks who work there. Well, it turns out they're all Carters. They're all related to the Carter family.
Right.
And the woman who worked the merch, we're talking a while, and I looked down at her and I said, I just hate I never got the chance to see Mr. Cash. And she grabs my arm, squeezes it, and says, come back next week. And then proceeds to take me to Jeanette and Joe and the whole family and says, this is Daniel. He's going to come back and shoot next week's show for us.
Oh, very cool.
So suddenly, through this past year, and I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. Do I want to continue taking pictures? And I first read about Johnny Cash in a comic book when I was 8-9 years old. And the following week, I am photographing John's tribute to June on what would have been her birthday show at the Carter fold for the Carter family.
Oh, wow.
And leading up to that week, I just kind of looked at myself in the mirror and said, you're dreaming this, Coston. Don't overthink this. You get, sometimes when you have a big gig coming up, you psych yourself out.
Right.
You worry about
Right.
the what's its or what can happen, what can not happen. It's like, you're dreaming this. Go shoot it.
Oh yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Go shoot all of this and look at the dream later on and say, okay, I did okay. So he came back. He played the show on June 21st. He was going to come back June 28th, and I was there for that. But he wasn't well enough. But the family was like, you should come back next week. It's like there was again. I thought I was going to be in New Jersey the weekend of July 5th. I had a friend who was going to be doing a music festival. Well, the music festival crashed that week, like just blew up, canceled outright.
Right.
And I was like, well, I know where I want to go then. So I literally got there just as they were wheeling in Mr. Cash for what ended up being his final show.
Wow.
And so it was July 5th. And he had planned on coming back to the fold in September. He told Jeanette he wanted to come back and do some more shows.
Right.
And of course, he passed away September 12th.
Wow.
So now then first the Carter family is using my pictures, and then people like Rolling Stone heard about me through the Carters. They're buying pictures. You know, one of my pictures of Mr. Cash was like used for the last interview he did with Time magazine that aired it ran a month before he passed away. And then the Cash families later then Lost Highway bought pictures, and it's just this moment of I can literally absolutely put Johnny Cash on my resume. How did that happen?
Right.
But it came from a real place of love and not thinking about, well, this could happen. I might get. It's like, no, this is happening. Go shoot that.
Yeah.
I mean,
capture the moment. Be a part of it. Don't. Yeah.
Try not to overthink it.
Right. You're not going in going. I can get a lot of money for this final show of Johnny Cash, because you don't know.
No. And if I had never if I had never gotten a cent for those pictures,
right.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
For that one, doesn't matter. I mean, none of us want to go broke doing what we care about.
No.
But there's some things you're like, I don't care how this turns out. I am doing this, and I'm doing this to the best of my abilities. And
the best art is when you're not caring at all about what the money looks like.
Yeah. Just do it.
As long as you're able to do it. That doesn't matter. The money does not matter.
And that whole summer was like that. I look back now and go, how did I do that? Because like the week before those shows, it was 2 days, I think. White Stripes played Grady Cole on the Elephant Tour.
Oh my God.
Shot that. 2 weeks later, I'm spending 2 days in Nashville with Les Paul at the Ryman and then at the Country Music Hall of Fame. I shot.
So like, when you're spending time with them, like, are you like in these moments like this, are there times where you're sitting with these artists or being able to hang around? Is it
hanging around?
Right.
I mean, like with Mr. Cash and especially Les Paul, there were so many people who still wanted to be interacting with him, at him, around him. And I think sometimes it's benefited me that I try not to demand any more of the musician's time than I absolutely need to or want to. Sometimes just being around and watching them be themselves and watching how they're interacting with people allows for the best pictures.
right?
And so one thing I learned from looking at the work of Jim Marshall and Henry Diltz and a lot of the photographers who worked in LA and London in the 60s and 70s, like Garrett Mankiewicz, they just blended in. Ethan Russell's another important person that I saw early on. And it's like they became part of the fabric. They were part of the circle, and the less that the artist thought about the person who that was, sometimes the better. To this day, if I'm working with somebody new, I usually don't. It's not my nature anyway, but I try not to say, oh, by the way, I'm Daniel. I work with blah, 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 blah.
Right.
That overwhelms people. And I understand that, because you figure, who is this guy? And he must be crazy. And why is he wanting to take pictures of me? I'd rather you think less about me and let me photograph you in the moment you're in.
Right.
If I need to get your attention, if we're doing pose work, if I see something, I'll make that happen.
So in those situations, are you like, there's definitely times, like you said, where this is important to go, this is a moment, and I need to just kind of be a part of it and capture it. Like, are there times where, you're getting hired outright to go to that event? Mm-hmm. And in that situation, you just kind of don't be like, yeah, your buddy Terry is the one who called, the manager.
Oh, that's absolutely happened. Yeah, I'll give you a good example of that is that same summer, actually it was the fall, September, it was right after Mr. Cash passed away. I got an email from someone who was a microphone sponsor for Merle Haggard. Hey, we need new pictures of Merle. Do you want to go to the Birchmere and take some pictures of him? Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're paying me too? Yeah. Okay.
Who was if you don't mind me asking, who's the sponsor? Do you remember?
I do, but I don't want to say it, and I'll explain why.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I get to the to the Birchmere, and it's sound check. And I introduced myself to the road manager, and he says, well, we stopped using that microphone. It crapped out last week. And all I could do was laugh.
Yeah.
It's like I've driven 6-7 hours, and like, I mean, that you know, it's like if there was a rim shot,
Yeah,
you know,
but
from the
yeah.
stage, it would have been perfect. But I have to say, Merle's people were absolute class. They said, you drove here. We will pull Merle off the bus, and we'll put that mic. We still have the mic. We'll put him on stage, and you can get pictures of him. So, and we did it. And
cool.
first, Merle didn't know what to do. They rolled him off the bus, literally. And
Oh,
first, he's
wow,
standing
yeah.
there. He's like this. And of course, I don't know what to say to him, but I'm like, I'm kind of anxious to see where this goes. You know, sometimes I have a plan. Like, if I know the person, I can say, okay, do this.
Right.
It's not like Merle Haggard. I've never met him before. It's like, let's
How
just
do you,
see where this goes.
How do you direct this? Yeah.
Or sometimes you let the moment direct itself.
Well,
I'm
it's
kind of
such
more
a-
interested to see where it just falls to sometimes.
It's such a crazy, dumb showbiz moment of like,
Yeah.
you need to be in this photo for this sponsorship that we're paying for, but we don't want to use this crap.
Yeah. So like first he's doing this, and then he starts air guitaring for me, and I'm just shooting this. Of course, I'm thinking if it's good, I can just crop it.
Right.
But eventually, I got closer to him. I got really good shots of him with the mic, and his people asked to use him. I don't know if they ever did. Otherwise, I would have Merle on my resume as well. I've never got that confirmed even all these years later. And then they were like, "You want to hang around and shoot the show?" Yeah. Okay. So I was there under official capacity, but sometimes even then the circumstances shift.
Yeah. That's so crazy. I mean, and one thing that you keep saying that I think is so good is talking about like taking the gig and going wherever, you know, because to me, a lot of the work that you do obviously is here in North Carolina and especially Charlotte area because you're based here. But
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of go anywhere. But I mean, especially when you say something like working with, like when there's a local band like the Avits,
Yeah.
right? Like, you know, when like do you start or even that like Whiskey Town or any of that? Do they start kind of popping up on your radar and you're like, I'm going to go see what these guys are doing?
Sometimes.
Sometimes
I have friends like Carolina Chocolate Drops. I had been hearing from friends in Eastern North Carolina for so long that when I finally saw them in May 2006, I felt like a latecomer. I didn't know it was their first show in Charlotte. I didn't
Right.
realize it was like one of their first out-of-town shows away from Merlefest. I think they'd done Merlefest at that point. They had done shows around Eastern North Carolina. I didn't realize they still saw themselves as newbies. And we all just connected immediately because we were all travelers. We were all on this ride. So we all hung out and we've all stayed friends ever since. So
that's great.
and I would just, oh, you're coming back to Charlotte? I'll go see you there. Oh, I think I'm off this night, and you're playing York. Okay, I'll go see you at this old theater, and I'll see you down there. It was kind of, with the Avits, I was friends with Bob Crawford. He had been in a band called the Memphis Quick 50. We all hung out together. We all listened to the same records. I did some work with them, and then one night, Bob pulled me aside and said, "Don't tell the other guys, I'm starting to play with these brothers from Concord. You really should come see us live." And soon after he left the Quick 50, went with the Avits full time, and
Right.
I think, and he hasn't looked back since. So
Right.
but it was amazing to watch them grow as artists. I think I'm sure, but I've not been able to find the pictures. I think I saw Nemo. I remember thinking they were really loud and screechy, which they were, and then I saw them first with Bob in September 2001 at Fat City, playing to like 60 people, which, it was like 60 people in Fat City felt like a massive crowd, especially
Right.
for a band I'd never seen before. But to then watch them grow from Fat City, Wine Vault, Sylvia Theater, all of a sudden McGlowan,
Oh, yeah.
Belk, and now
Yeah.
it's 3 nights sold out at Red Rocks. It's amazing. And people said, is it bizarre when your friends become big? Yeah, it is. But I would wish that for any of my friends. I got to have a similar conversation with a guy named Charles Roberts a couple of years ago. He booked a Quarrymen show in Liverpool in 1957. He has some of the earliest pictures of the Quarrymen.
Right.
And he was like, I went to school with all of them. I never asked for their autograph. It was just like, it was John, it was Paul, it was George.
Just didn't think about it.
Yeah, it was just, you're just
Before
in the
they
moment.
changed the name.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was like, his experiences with the Beatles were my experiences with the Avits, even though I ended up working with the Avits for an extended period of time. It was fascinating. It was like, almost like a nice confirmation of, okay, you've had this experience too with a band that to me is even bigger than the Avett Brothers.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's nice and it's cool, and yeah, sometimes it is a little strange. It's a shame that I can't go over to Scott and Seth's house or Bob's and hang out and see how they're doing. I usually,
Right.
I hear about it through them or other people, even brief emails or this and that. But it's like, there's so many bands along the way that you go, man, I hope they really do something, and then they blow up even bigger beyond your expectations, and that's cool. That's really cool.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and there's so many different artists around here that kind of do that sort of thing, and it's surprising.
It's like Josh, discussing Josh Daniel. I've known him from the Harmony Sparks days and all those other groups.
He's done tons of stuff. Fantastic.
And all the guys. Even back to all the guys who were in Lou Ford and like Alan's in the mountains now doing his thing. Sean Lynch is in 20 million bands, and I'm happy and proud for all of them.
So that leads me to an interesting question, because over and over again you keep talking about with the people that you've worked with for extended periods of time.
Yeah.
And how does that relationship change, right? I mean, you constantly, see bands that had, archivists or documentarians that work with them all the time because there was a certain level of comfortability there. It's where you alluded to taking the picture in that moment, right? Instead of taking the picture with you posed holding this microphone, because it's these two different kind of reactions. Yeah. So how, from an artistic standpoint, do you feel like developing that relationship benefits your work?
I think the sooner that a photographer can become a friend or someone they look at as a fellow traveler, fellow artist, I think it benefits. There's some artists that, it's strange. Some artists you work with the first time and it works spot on. And then after that, it's different because maybe they've changed, the situation has changed, you've changed. With some bands, and particularly the Avetts and more so drive-by truckers, as I was working with them then, they're being introduced to more photographers. Their management wants them to work with other people.
Right.
They're meeting other people on the road. And while as a photographer, you would like your relationship to change and grow with every artist.
Right.
I'm very close with friends. I don't have a lot of friends from childhood friends from childhood I see often. So my friends I hold very dear to myself. But you also sometimes recognize that they're going to evolve, they're going to change, they're going to grow, and sometimes they grow away, or you may not see them for a while. And that's going a different place than your question. But it starts out from a place of, oh, hey, I know you. Okay, well, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? And sometimes it grows further and then grows away. Or a band like, say, Chatham County Line. I've shot 4 records for Chatham County Line, and I was kind of put out to pasture by them because I'd shot too many records for them. But I still, every time I photograph them, they're still using my pictures.
Right.
So it helps the photographer gets to know the artist, tries to. Some photographers like to be the center of attention. I'm not that thing. I'd rather blend in, and I know how to pick my moments or try to pick my moments. But once the artists feel more comfortable with that photographer, I think it benefits you just being there with them. So I was looking back recently, this year I went back and found all my pictures from the Robbinsville sessions for the Avett Brothers, which is the photos we took in Robbinsville and then the overdubs which were done in Winston-Salem. And there's so many great pictures where they're not looking at me, they're not even thinking about me, which is what I wanted.
Right.
I wanted to catch them as they were, which is interacting with each other. And things like that, if you didn't know, if the artist doesn't know who this person is, they're not as likely to be as welcoming or feel as comfortable being themselves around you.
Right.
So I like being in the situation where, we don't have to be best buddies. And I understand, especially with photographers, that's not always possible with some people. But give me enough leeway where you're not thinking about me, you're not worrying about me, and I will make you look as good, if not better, than you already do.
Right. Let you do the work.
Yeah.
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 Do what you're there for, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
This is a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun.
Right.
And I'm willing to put the work in to get something better. I'm still fascinated by the idea that there's a better picture out there of Scott and Seth or Mercury Carter,
Right.
than I've taken before. And it thrills me, and it frustrates me that I haven't gotten it yet, but if you keep at it, you'll get there.
Right. Exactly. Did you do the recent drive-in shows?
I did. I shot that. That was an interesting experience in that I emailed them, said, hey, this is going to be cool. I'd love to shoot this for our local magazine. And they said, would you do that? And, oh, by the way, could you kind of shoot those for us? Because
cool.
they were, understandably, they had seen what would happen with other drive-in shows. And they were worried that if people acted up or acted out of turn, that would get out in the media.
Right.
And I saw Dolph, their manager, that day, and he said, well, if anything happens, and I just looked at him and said, it ain't running.
Right.
He's like, okay. And
Right.
That's the truth, because I still want the guys to look as good as possible.
Right.
And I also was just thrilled. I mean, take for me, I'm watching a band that I saw Nemo, I saw Seth get up and do a song with Dave Rames at Puckett's in 2001.
Wow, yeah.
Then I'm seeing the Avets, playing these small crowd at Fat City. I later become the first photographer, they said, you're the first real photographer we worked with. And which was, Superchunk said the same thing. I shot a record for Superchunk in 2002, and they were like, well, you're the first real photographer we ever hired. Really nervous to work with you. And I'm like, you're nervous. You're Superchunk. I'm scared out of my wits. But it was just amazing. There's a couple times I looked around both shows and like, who'd have thunk this? 20 years later,
Right.
I'm photographing them around 1,600 cars, and I'm technically shooting for the Avett Brothers again.
Right.
How about that?
Same. It's just same band, different venue. You know.
Slightly different venue
Five
size.
5 minutes away from Puckett's.
Yeah.
Where you first.
I knew they weren't going to do any. None of us do the after shows like we used to. But I would have loved to have seen them.
That's how we survive. That's how we survive.
Yeah. Well, it's like the Keith Richards thing. Keith has done a lot. He's just known when not to do too much.
Right. Exactly.
God bless him.
Yeah.
So, but I would
man.
love to have seen that. But yeah, it's amazing. Again, I'm blessed to have stayed at this.
Yeah.
That, somebody asked me the last couple of years, like, what are you proudest of? And I said, survival. That I'm actually still doing this.
God, yeah. No, that is.
I didn't quit. I didn't give this up. I didn't, toss all of my work. Like, I've known way too many photographers to do that or lose them all on hard drives. I still have everything I've ever photographed in 25 years. And now I have archives of other people, other artists.
Right.
And, the fact that I'm still here talking to you guys is kind of thrilling, and I don't know how that happened, but it's cool it did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's crazy too, just to be able to look back on a body of work. And I mean, God, we could sit here and literally just throw stories of all the artists that you work with, because it's ridiculous. But so is that kind of where you started transitioning, or not really transitioning, but like starting doing some of the stuff for authoring and stuff? It's because with all the books that you have out too, what was the first one that you did?
First one was the Double Door book.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And that, I was a features writer for many years. After Tangents ended, I did a lot of feature writing for Tangents. For the last 22 years, I've been doing interviews for the Big Takeover magazine out of New York, and that'll led me a chance to interview a lot of the bands I end up working with, like Big Star, The Remains. I photographed Arthur Lee in Love twice. After Arthur passed away, I contacted the surviving members of the band, interviewed them. Those interviews are now in the Forever Changes box set, which I'm really proud of.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah, that was very cool.
Yeah,
and I didn't know about it until after it ran. A friend of mine who I'm actually hopefully working with on another book now, I contacted him, say, hey, man, congrats on this box. That's awesome. He said, oh, I meant to call you. Like, I used your interviews in this box set. Is that cool? I'm like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's only one of my favorite records ever. Yeah, I'm cool with that. But I had always toyed with the notion of doing books, but the first book, the Double Door book, kind of happened by happenstance. I had a call from Nick Karras in 2007, And he said, there's this writer down here named Debbie Wallace. She's interviewing me. She needs pictures. Can you come down? Yeah, I was free that day and came down. And Debbie was talking about, I always wanted to do a book on the double door. And just without thinking, I said, you should, and I'll help you do it.
Right.
Because I just believe that this book on the double door should exist. And so we worked together on that. She did the initial draft, and then I kind of completed it, added my own interviews, added the pictures. We published that in April 2009, and then Debbie passed away a month after publication.
Oh, wow.
And
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And she passed away the same week that my grandmother passed away. And that was interesting. And that point, I realized that I was kind of the shepherd for the Double Door project.
Yeah.
And so few years later, we did for the 40th anniversary of the Double Door, we did a new version of that with a new chapter. After the Double Door closed in 2017, I realized that the book really needed to be completed and tell the whole story, at which point I largely rewrote the whole book from scratch in about 2-3 months. Photography is what I do day in, day out. It's just, thankfully it happens and happens very easily. Writing is almost like possession for me at certain times.
Right.
Writing comes from a different place in me. And then when it demands my attention, it's all down the rabbit hole. I refer to myself as a binge writer.
Well,
and I
exactly.
write very quickly. Like all my books have been written in short spates, largely because of my time crunch, and also because it was saying you're getting this all out of your head now.
Right.
And I've learned how to edit that and kind of control that a little more, much as you can control anything in the creative process.
It's a muscle, right? Once you kind of
is.
figure out how that muscle works a little bit, it's knowing how to be patient and sit and wait for the, whatever that inspiration is that happens, And if you do it right, it's almost like you're not writing it; you're just transcribing.
It's coming out of you.
It's just
those are amazing. I had that happen earlier this year with a book I'm hopefully be published in the coming year, which is a book of essays about my life and the strange adventures we're talking about. And that one I had finished, and again, I had a spate of about 8 days where I literally completed 3 books. And the first book was a autobiography of Maurice Williams, which had been on my desk for 3 years. Took 2 days, put that together. Spent 2 days putting together a new book on the last days of the Double Door Inn, which was a photo book. Just always felt like those photos of those last days were a separate project. I kind of knew that even at the time. Took 2 days, put that together, and said, okay, now let's tackle this essay book. And I wrote 62 essays in 4 days. It just came out of my head. But it was like it had been up here.
You've been working
life.
on it in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. You think about, I should tell that story about hanging out with Garth Hudson or
right.
the story
the
of
inner monologue.
And then one day your head says, okay, tell the story now.
Yeah.
Go. And I actually kind of put that book together the way that the Avits put together Four Thieves, and that they went up to Robbinsville, had this amazing burst of songs where they're writing and recording for 7-8 days, and then later, a couple months later, took that to Winston and kind of refined it, overdubbed.
Right.
And where sometimes if it all just blurts out of your head, it can be a bit of a mess. Some people, it becomes up more like On the Road, which is just this amazing screed, but it's a harnessed screed that Kerouac put together. I need a couple extra edits to make it a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so somewhere probably in the next few weeks, I'll go back and finish the essay book, and it'll be out for one publisher or another in the coming year.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But
looking forward to that.
It's interesting also again to reflect on my life now and reflect on it in the middle of all this that we've been going through for the past year. Is interesting time, but I think I needed that.
If there's any year that everyone could just kind of sit and figure out, look back and look forward, this is the year. This is the year to do it.
I almost needed that. I couldn't have done it in the middle of working. Because my head is usually in the new projects, the new stuff.
Right.
You generally only get me if someone says, "Oh, I want to look at putting a reissue of these pictures or this project," then I'll go back and look at it. I did that earlier this year. I shot a DVD for Sunvolt in 2005. That's one of those pictures I sent you came from. And they contacted me last year and said, "We're going to reissue that as on vinyl." And I said, "Can I please rescan everything?" because I just was
Right.
not happy how it had originally looked 15 years ago. And I went back and rescanned all 9 rolls. And now it looks fabulous. I have to say, the guys did an amazing job. I mean, it's like double gatefold vinyl, orange vinyl, and it's just
Wow.
like, it looks like, you know, it's like when you're a kid, you look at Phantom Comes Alive
Oh,
or something
yeah.
like
You
one of those
just stare at
you
it.
know, it's like looking
Yeah.
at album covers like, oh, how do you get that gig? Like, how do you do that?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
that's how I feel looking. I was like, I did that.
Yeah.
I did.
No,
put
that's-
it for this record. It's
Well, that's
really
awesome,
cool.
and
Thank
it's
you.
such a it's such a lost thing too of just how important the visual of the vinyl and of the packaging
Yeah.
and all that stuff is,
Well,
because
it's a whole other world.
Yeah.
It's like you wanted to dive into that world. It was like looking at a Led Zeppelin record or a Neil Young record.
Yeah.
And it's like that's a whole other world. Like what goes on in that world? And it's the slight distance and the presentation that makes it all the more fascinating. And
Absolutely.
I still love being a part of that. And I'm thrilled about some of these projects I'm working on in the coming year, where I'm helping in new recordings and old recordings. And actually, but backtracking a bit, going to the other books.
right.
Once I did the first Double Door book, after that book came out, I was contacted by a local musician named Jake Berger, who's been around since the 60s. And he said, when are you going to do a book on my scene, meaning the 60s rock and roll scene? And I realized that it was a scene I didn't know that much about, and I should. Much in the way that something in my head said, you need to know more about the Carter family.
Right.
So I started working on that book over a few years. At the same time, I got a offer to put together a book of photos. Originally, it was a photo book on North Carolina musicians for McFarland. Well, the writer for that couldn't do it, so I picked up the writing too, did that. And it was like once I started doing books, it was like, oh, yeah, this makes absolute sense.
Yeah. Especially with I mean the writing background and I mean knowing as far as the photo editing and doing that. I mean it's the same.
Yeah,
It's
it's putting together a record. It's very
Exactly.
much like putting together a record in a project that where you say, oh, I can see what this can be, or sometimes it evolves and
Yeah.
changes as you're putting it together.
once you
And all
break
the
down
books-
the complications of I've never done this before and just go, no,
Yeah.
I have in whatever way.
Yeah.
And, I'll piece it together.
I think I trust myself a lot more now as a writer. I don't have the hang-ups I did 10, 15 years ago to just say, you know what, I think I can do this.
Yeah, getting out of your own way is the biggest.
Yes.
Well, now that like that with the essays and taking the time to reflect now, like now that you've kind of almost, I mean, you've literally written the book on it of what you've done.
Yeah.
Now that you've done that reflecting, like, is there something where you're like, this is what I want to do different. This is where I want to go now, or maybe not different, but like now that you've kind of had this touchstone.
Yeah.
Where do you've also probably had the time to think of what do I do next?
And which has kind of been happening throughout this year.
Right.
Right before all this stuff happened this year, I had met The Circle, which the Circle was named by John Lennon, co-managed by Brian Epstein.
Okay.
Toured with the Beatles in 1966.
Yeah.
They were a band.
I started looking them up after seeing that you were working with them, and they're fantastic.
Yeah, great band.
Yeah.
Really underrated, 3 great records, and I had been a fan for years. Well, a couple of years ago, they had reformed with 2 original members, and they were doing a show in Ohio. Well, let's drive to Ohio.
Drive to Ohio, yeah.
Yeah, drive to Ohio, drive 10 hours, photograph them, meet them, take pictures of them, drive back home. And around the same time, I helped put together a record for Maya Beth Atkins, who's the daughter of Jason Atkins.
Yeah,
I helped put that record together.
Awesome.
Almost again, when everybody's looking at it, man, he just kind of stumbles into this stuff. It's known wandering.
Yeah, well, that's what
I'm always kind of looking for the next thing.
Yeah.
But you also have to let it talk to you. Some people say, "Oh, it has to only be this." No, sometimes the world has a different idea for you, but you have to listen to it. Photography very much did that with me. I could have stayed in my writing video field, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. But something said, "You're doing this. Hop on," and I said, "Okay, let's go." And with Maya Beth Atkins, I had run into Shell, Jason's wife. Maya Beth was playing at the Pizza Peel in Plaza Midwood.
Yep.
And they were telling me how they'd raised some money, and the person they were gonna work with things had happened, and it wasn't gonna work out. And I said, if you would give me a day, I'll put this record together. And I called Chris Gargis of Old House Recordings, and we put the record together. And
It's
to
awesome.
watch that,
It's a great record.
Thank you. I'm really proud of that.
It's
I'm
a
really
great
proud of
record.
Mia Beth, and when she's ready to do a second record, I'll do it all over again.
So as far as like that, like completely changing in, I noticed that you said when we were looking at some stuff, executive producer, and so my producer brain just kind of wants to go like when you're producing or putting together a record or something like that. Like, do you see yourself in more of a role of I'm overall I'm as far as an executive producer overall looking at everything, but still getting other producers involved, getting other engineers involved, getting other musicians, or do you see it very much like you're the producer of a record?
I don't see myself more as the auteur. I look at more as the person who helps facilitate putting the parts together so that the artist can create the best work they possibly can. Mia Beth was actually a really good starting point in retrospect because she had the ideas, but she'd never been in a studio before. She knew how she wanted songs to go, but she was still figuring out working with musicians. And I had to find musicians that I knew could work with her so that to bring out the best in her and working with a band in a studio situation. I actually based that record on the way they did the first two Bill Withers records. And that Bill had never worked in a studio before, but they said, we're going to put you with a killer rhythm section, just the bass and drums, and we will build on that. So then that's what we did. She recorded several songs solo, and then we brought in Mike Kennerly and Sean Lynch on bass. And we built those. Who was
the drummer on that?
As Mike, it was the drummer for Jolene and later of the Loudermilks.
Right. Okay.
I think DK is on drums on another session, but it was like people that she knew or had grown up around, but could work with her.
Because Jason works with everybody.
Yes.
So it makes it.
And then Jason came in, did his thing, and for my biggest job on that was like, okay, let's get the best out of you at this moment. At the same time, try not to say, well, I think you should do this. It's like ultimately the artist has to be the artist. Right. Which then really ended up benefiting me working with The Circle. Because originally, after I saw them in 2018, I was like, I started thinking about it. I was like, well, originally I was like, I could do a book with them. And it was like, wait, here's a crazy thought. What if they made the record they didn't get to make in 1968, 69? Because, they were basically recorded a whole other album's worth of songs. Columbia didn't want to release it as an album. The band splintered. They broke up. Okay. So I was like, what if you got the chance to go in the studio?
And that was what year?
That was I met them in 2018.
No, I mean as far as like the year they couldn't release
68.
something. Okay.
68.
Because I'm trying to frame it in my mind because they're managed. I didn't know that Lennon named the band or that they were also that they were managed by Epstein or whatever. So they're a little bit, in the era of like Columbia going, okay, we're just kind of put our money in all these different bands and whichever one works is which one works.
Columbia had this amazing, thing where at the same time that, Paul Simon signed to them. So they're recording Paul Simon songs, the amount of Paul Revere and the Raiders. It's like the people who were recording on Columbia at that point is just astounding.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And The Circle was in the middle of that.
Yeah. And they're a fantastic band. I'm really, just from seeing that, I was like, let me look them up. And I went down like a YouTube wormhole. I think they're great.
And
absolutely
their
great.
last album, in some ways, is a personal favorite for a lot of us. And it was for a film soundtrack that when the film was made was not a porno. But then the film got re-edited, the band breaks up, and it gets released as a porno. So
I just always want, I love... Every project needs to start with, well, when we started working on this, it wasn't a porno. It was not a porno.
The irony is, and we'll discuss this in a bit, I'm also now co-producing
a porno? No, I'm just
no, not yet. That doesn't pay enough.
You haven't got there yet.
Not yet. Wait for it. But now I'm co-producing, and I'll get into that, to a Left Bank collection. Well, in the early 70s, the Left Bank Reform did an amazing single, and it was released on a porno soundtrack. So it's like, I had this moment this summer. I'm like, I'm working on new recordings by The Circle, which we did in March of 2020, literally 4 days before the world broke down.
Oh, wow.
So we did 6 new songs, re-recordings, but in new songs, with the idea of this is a starting place for this album. And we also, the band was approached by Universal to do new versions of their hits.
Oh, great.
And they were like, let's do that. But let's also record some songs that are favorites of ours, or songs that people have been requesting. So we did that in 2 days in Ohio, And then I came
What
back.
was the studio in Ohio?
It was in Johnstown, Ohio. A guy named Rusty Yannick. It was out of his home studio.
Okay.
And some of the musicians in the current circle knew him, so they felt comfortable there.
Oh, good.
Don Daneman, the original singer and guitarist for the circle, had not. He after the circle broke up in '68, he went into commercial production in New York, so he has very much attuned New York producer ears.
I was about to say, so he's probably extremely in a good way, very particular.
Very. So it took us months to get these mixes right to his ears, and thankfully we had the time to do that.
Right.
So we found this studio in Ohio that the band all felt comfortable with. Don likes the producer. I originally was going to have the song.
Massive.
Yeah, massive. And I was going to have the songs mixed in Charlotte by a producer, but Don and the producer in Ohio bonded so well. I was like, okay, if you guys are willing to see this through, this will be a process. Let them do it. Because ultimately the project will be better because of it. Right. And that's really my job as an executive producer on a project like this. Is like, it's a shepherd position. Like, give me the staff.
It definitely is, and it's so funny being in that role too. It's the best thing I ever heard said about it is, if at the end of the project, if like I need to be very happy with it and you need to be very happy with it, and if we didn't both do that,
we failed.
Then we failed.
Yeah, and everybody has been really happy with this.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you. So the new versions of Red Rubber Ball and Turn Down Day are on YouTube. Yeah. We'll release their first new single in 53 years in 2 weeks. A new version of Feelin' Groovy, the 59th Street Bridge song, which the band turned down from Paul Simon in 1966. Backed with another favorite of mine from their back catalog, song called The Visit. Okay. And then once those are out, we'll ride this year out and see how we can just progress towards going on a new record.
Yeah, but
the response has been fantastic. The phrase that I love hearing that tells me I did a good job is, that's way better than I thought it was going to be. Because generally when a musician goes back and does something, it doesn't have the same feel or the vibe. It doesn't complement the original recordings. And I actually, when we were discussing putting this project together, I used the Monkees' 2016 album, Good Times, as a template, and I've worked with the Monkees, which we've discussed as well. It's like, you can create something that feels like a companion to what you did before, but stands on its own 2 feet.
Absolutely.
And that's really what I really wanted out of these recordings with the Circle. Yeah. And so it's been a process, but I knew it would be. And the fact that we got 6 songs done 4 days before the world shut down is just kind of mind-boggling. It really is.
Yeah. I mean, the timing. It was a project that was meant to be finished.
If we'd planned it the next weekend, we wouldn't have been able to do this for another year. Yeah, it's just kind of amazing.
It's crazy. So it's crazy.
And a lot. So that's one is how I've gotten myself through this year is writing, doing small work here and there, focusing on getting these circle mixes done, and then in the middle of it, this chance to co-produce a collection of songs by the Left Bank. The Left Bank is one of my personal favorites. Walk Away Renee was their first single, fall 1966, went top 5. The band members were collectively 17 and 15 at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, insanely young, had not really played out that much, so suddenly they're thrown on the road, and then the story really began. And the core of that band were 4 guys who loved and argued with each other in equal measure. It was I don't say love-hate. Hate gets overused.
It's a very young band.
Very young. And the only way they knew how to interact with each other was creative tension. And it was like, it's like George told me, that George, their drummer, said, it was like, if we weren't yelling at each other every practice, it wasn't a practice. It was just how they interacted, it's how they did it. Even when part of the band reformed in 2011. And I was part of that as well. I had first introduced myself to band members in 2002 doing interviews for the Big Takeover. And then I found out in 2011 that they were going to reunite with 2 original members and do some shows in New York. And I said, can I come up and take pictures? So I did. And then by the end of it, I'm working with them. And then I spent the next 2 years going up to New York and other cities, photographed them with the Zombies, and then kind of watched the project kind of start to wind down. Their last show was June 6, 2013, which I wasn't going to go to because it was my wife's birthday. And I felt bad driving, it's even,
Right.
I can't run off to New York every day. That kind of looks bad. And then Tom Finn, who was the band's bass player, songwriter, second vocalist, said, you really need to be here for this show. Michael Brown, who was the guy who wrote Walk Away Renee, Pretty Ballerina,
Right.
the lion's share of those songs is going to be here. And he did. He came
Wow,
on stage,
okay.
played Walk Away Renee with them. It was the first time they'd all played that song together since 1966.
Wow.
And within 7 years, all three members had passed away.
Wow.
And Tom passed away in June of this year, and I'd stayed in touch with them up to the end. And then a few weeks later, a friend of mine who runs Omnivore Recordings, which is an amazing record label out of California, she and I had first met in Austin in 2002. We had this huge conversation about the band, and I didn't know that she'd done all the band reissues in the early 2000s. So it was
Right.
like, okay, I need to hang with you more. We need to stay in touch. And one of the first things we talked about was some recordings that the Left Bank had done around that time that we both knew about, but we couldn't get our hands on. Mm-hmm. And over the years, I acquired all these unreleased recordings from the band post 1968. Things they did in 69, 71, 2002, 2001, some radio recordings they did this new version of the band in 2011.
And where are you finding these at? Especially like the tape reels and everything. Are they just stuck in a studio somewhere for years?
Kind of all over the place. Some of it was through band members. Some said, hey, I've got a burn of this. Do you want it?
Right.
Or some friends of theirs got stuff out of Tom's apartment, made copies, gave it to collectors. I got it
Right.
from them. And because I requested I requested CDs because they said, do you want MP3s? Like, nah, send me a CD because I wanted a physical copy.
Right.
It felt more real to me to have it on CD or vinyl. So because of that, I got high-res
files, yeah.
of all these things. And then when we were putting this project together, I said, well, I've got all this. I'm sure there's other collectors that have more. No. Sadly, all the band members and all the collectors that I had interacted with for years had all passed away because they were
Wow.
all older than me.
Right.
So there's that moment where I realized I was that guy. I was the one that literally had the largest collection of unreleased Left Bank songs.
That's fascinating. When is that coming out?
We were originally going to put out in November
Okay.
last month, but then the band did a third album in the 70s, which I do recommend, but it's super hard to find. Only the Left Bank could have a record that nobody would claim as theirs. The record had been sold so many times to different labels.
Uh-huh.
It got a small release in the 80s, but then it was actually put out through Relics Records in America, but they didn't claim it. So I think we
Wow.
finally figured out how to license that record. I then was starting to find that there was some possible more unreleased material. Some may be in New York, some may be in Kansas. Mm-hmm. And I'm giving that another month to see if we can get copies of those. And along with finally getting this third album licensed, we finally got access to one of the radio shows that the band did in 2011, which for me makes the second CD, brings it to really a more of a full story than what we had.
Wow.
So right now we're looking at a spring release for that, and it'd be my first official co-producing credit.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And again, it's for a band I love, and it's been one of my enjoyable rabbit holes this year. Is like I want to find out as much as I can about these recordings and document what's out there, what may be out there. Because a lot of us who are fans of this band, we talked about it, or I heard they did blank, 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 and blank, blank. Nobody actually ever wrote it down.
Right.
So election week and then the week after, I said, okay, I'm going to write all this down. So I literally have a giant spreadsheet now of every recording I know of either to exist or was done and presumed lost post 1968.
Wow.
Of this band. So it's like I can actually send to you, this is what I think exists, what I know to exist of the band.
That's crazy.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, it's a really cool thing too, just to chronologize, just to get all that, because it's definitely important information. I mean, it really is.
And if you're in this long enough, whether you're a fan or a collector, you become an archivist, and that doesn't have to be a 4-letter word. That really can be a situation where you have something that means something to you, and I think some people equate collecting with bootlegging. I was like, no, we just want to make sure this stuff exists. I don't want this stuff to die with me. I had something happen to me a couple of years ago where I was at a friend's funeral, and they put up a bunch of pictures I'd taken of the artist, and I'll be honest, they were pictures I'd completely forgotten about. Mm-hmm. And I went back to my car and just completely broke down. And I was mad at myself, and I didn't know why I was reacting that way, and I realized it was because I had this fear that if I passed away the next day, all these things would go too.
Right.
And I see that way too much now. I've been dealing with that with the left bank. A good friend of mine just passed away, and we had to get all of his computers out of his house before they cleaned his house out. So it was like literally saving hard drives from the garbage can. And again, it's like, will anybody hear this stuff? Hopefully. Mm-hmm. Does it exist? Good. It should.
Right, exactly.
And
it's there. It's there to be found.
And and that has happened to me now. Okay, I'll tell you guys something that is not publicly known.
Okay.
When the cash shows, when those shows happened, June 21st, July 5th, they did do board recordings of those shows.
Oh, wow.
The Fold did that for years. I don't know if those board recordings still exist, and I don't want to get into why that may not exist.
Okay.
But through circumstances, I had been given soundboards of their shows, and I found some stuff. Years ago, I talked to John Carter Cash. He and I do stay in touch, and I had said, someday you really need to hear this bootleg of your dad and your mom playing at the Highline Ballroom in 1996. It was a CD that somebody had given me and it was the show was the week after Unchained was released. Wow. So it's all the classic songs, and then it's him doing all the Unchained songs.
Yeah.
And it's just like literally the two worlds of Johnny's career on 2 CDs. And John Carter had never heard it. And so I finally found it, and I sent it to him, and he was very effusive. And I said, okay, John, I'm going to ask you a strange question. I hope you understand what I'm asking. If somebody came to you and said, I have these recordings from these shows, would it be okay if that person gave them to you? And John, God bless him, figured out what I was asking. And he said, I would love to have that. I don't have that.
Right.
So I literally gave soundboards of those shows that I photographed to, John and June's son.
Yeah. I mean, just on the personal level for him is probably
kind of
so
and I don't,
appreciative,
and I found too from talking to him, talking to other members of the family, Tommy and Roseanne Cash, who I talked with about this years ago. After Mr. Cash passed away, everybody wanted to offer everything to them, but everybody wanted a lot of money. And it's not about that for me. It's like this, a lot of the artists I work with, to me, they are family. They're extended family. And the Cash to me is family. The Cash and Carters are family in a way that, because their experiences, my experience with them did have a profound influence on my life.
Absolutely.
And so if I can help preserve that love and conversation, I'm going to do it. So it was nice.
Sure.
And then again, it was nice to know that the family now has that. Will anybody ever hear it? Hopefully. If not, it exists. True. And ultimately, good work deserves to exist.
Well, and it seems like with any time with a legacy artist like Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
You see it happen where, it might not be an immediate thing of a release, but after a couple of years, different members of the family, or they'll have a different opinion or thoughts about something, and it will see the light of day.
And John Carter and the Cash family and the Cash Trust has started to see that. They've only, understandably, they don't want to dive into it at once, it does bring back a lot of emotion for them to go back through those things again.
For sure.
But I think somewhere down the road you will see more things from those latter periods. I mean, I hope someday that the shows from '96, like the Highline show, gets released because it's just so good, and it really brings back. There's something about seeing an artist, and I'm talking about it's a thrill to see somebody on the way up, but it's also a thrill to see somebody like Merle Haggard, like Mr. Cash, like Aretha Franklin, who I did photograph in 2011. That was an amazing experience. You know, some of these people, and you go, Ray Charles, and say they have this amazing body of work,
right?
And to see them be able to present that. The Zombies do that. If you go see them now, it's like, oh my God, it's just breathtaking,
right?
You know, that they this is what they created. And it's something that all of us as artists hope that someday we're at a place where we can look back and say, yeah, that's some good stuff there. That's cool.
Oh,
you know?
absolutely.
Yeah, it's something we all hope for. And so it's nice to be able to, as an archivist, as a photographer, as a writer, as a videographer, and all these other things, to say, yeah, I was a part of documenting these things I loved, and along the way I documented some of my own life as well.
That's great. So as far, like, I know this year's been a little tough with this, but, you know, seeing, you know, being around different artists and stuff that are going, is there anybody in Charlotte now or in the area now that you've kind of seen or kind of coming up, or you can kind of see or kind of get a feeling of like, this person's doing something interesting or this band's doing something great, you know?
There's a bunch out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Mercury Carter, you know, Dame Page had played the night before. I like seeing what you're doing with your band.
Oh, shucks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. I mean,
thank you.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of really good artists who I think in the next year or two can make that record that go, oh man, much in the way that I watched Mignonette get built song by song, you know, to the point where I'm there. I was there with them when they recorded Salvation Song and much of that record. And
wow,
I look forward to the next year or two where many artists in this area get to make that record. You go, oh my God, I'm so glad I was around that at the time. So I look forward to the future. I really do. Yeah.
Oh, good.
You know, like I look forward to seeing what Josh does next. You know, I look forward to seeing what Justin Fedor does with the Denim. There's a lot of good stuff out there. And a lot of different varying genres. One of the things I've really enjoyed shooting these recent live streams is all these other artists I have not had the chance to see. Because, I just, or especially whether or not, I guess I sometimes drift into certain genres, subgenres more than others, but also I was, up until March, I was a working photographer.
Right.
It was not uncommon that I would be shooting anywhere from 2 to 4 events, social events, luncheons, galas a day, or working, photos for clients.
Right.
And go shooting a show at night or more. Or 2 or 3 or 4, just because, I want to do that. I'll go do that.
Got to take them when they come, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have this horrible problem saying no.
Yeah.
It's just like if I absolutely can pull off going to see this, even for a few minutes, I'm going.
Yep.
I'm totally going.
Well,
I only regret the ones I don't get to.
I think it's indicative of what you do, though, right?
Oh,
because there's one thing to go record a studio album because we can play that album over and over again and we can watch it and we can see it, right? But there's a completely different experience when you're live and and having from what I see from you, having that need and that that's your love, that's your passion, is to go document that and present it for people who can't be there. That to me, as a musician who's been on stage a lot, playing a gig and, literally feeling like I'm screaming through a horn, it's really, honestly, man, it's just great. It's a great feeling to see you have such a passion for documenting someone else's work. I mean, ultimately it's your work at that point, right? But
yes, it's part of the conversation. Thank you for saying that. It's really, for me, it's me experiencing the moment and trying to catch or document, describe what's happening to me and around me, and hopefully, if I get that, it comes through the picture.
Well, and that's so important, just the way you said that too, because it's like nobody in any live show anywhere is more important than anyone else.
Right.
It's so important. Every single person that's there, and to be, that's what's documented to me, and like in some of these pictures that you have is. Yes, a lot of them are other performers, but it's like that wouldn't happen right there if if this certain group of people, if the temperature wasn't the way it was, if all these little things, if you weren't standing on that side of the stage, if you happen to be somewhere else, all of that stuff is just so important, and you're such an important part of that fabric.
Oh, thank you.
And it's, it's really great. And also too, like you said, like screaming through your horn, like that's the best thing too with some of the pictures, because for me too, it's like if we have a photographer at a show, it's like when you're doing it, and you kind of forget it.
Yeah.
And to be able to even see it and kind of go like, oh, right, that happened.
Yeah.
Because it's done in a flash. I mean that.
Life happens very quickly.
Oh,
and hopefully you, as a photographer, you kept something of that moment as it goes along.
Hey everyone, just a quick split in the show to let you know how fantastic it was to talk to Daniel Coston and how much we appreciate him being on. We've taken the last few minutes of the interview and made it exclusive to our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel has full HD videos of all of our interviews, as well as exclusive performances, plus with some extra bonus content like this. We took the last few minutes of our interview, which has a great story of his, but we also included with photos he's taken, like that last Johnny Cash performance he was talking about, The Who, the Rolling Stones, Aretha Franklin, the Beach Boys, Wilco, Avett Brothers, Lenny Kravitz, so many photos that we kind of included there with those last few minutes. So go to youtube.com/user/Todd Johnson Band, or just search Making Noise with Todd Johnson on YouTube. You'll find our special playlist that we have set up, and check out the awesome work he's done. He's so much fun, man. Rate, review, share the podcast, do all the podcasting stuff. Your rates and reviews are like our credit score. So please make sure to check it out. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Thanks, y'all.
I wish you would rate my podcast and be a friend.